to feature now a brand new book on the scene. It's called Rules for Patriots, and the author of this newly released book, talk show host Steve Deace, is with us now. Steve, we welcome you to America's Forum.
Thank you, guys. JD, John, good to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Now, Steve, I see the title, and I'm just taken back a few decades to a book written by Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. Steve, is your book a counterpoint from the conservative point of view? Is Rules for Patriots the antidote to Rules for Radicals?
That's exactly what it is. And we felt there's been just so many great books that have been written by conservatives around the country. What's wrong with liberalism? Why doesn't it work? Why Obamanism has failed? Why you should believe the same as we do. But the one thing we've lacked is a plan. And as David Limbaugh points out in his foreword, guys, he's given so many speeches over the years about his best-selling books, and when he gets done, people come up to him and they say, I'm so fired up, what do I do next? And he's like, well, stand up for what you believe. And then they're like, well, what does that look like? And he goes, I don't know. Well, somebody needed to write a book about how we actually do what we believe, and that's exactly what Rules for Patriots, how conservatives can win again, that's what it aims to be.
And what is rule number one?
Well, it goes by my 10 commandments of political warfare. So the first thing we start off talking about is why we lose, and we can get into some of that if you want, but the first commandment, and they're in order, just like the regular 10 commandments, right? The real 10 commandments, first commandment is I'm God. The second commandment is don't obey other gods. So you got to get those first two right to figure out the other 8. Well, the same thing goes with my 10 commandments of political warfare. And the first commandment is never, ever, ever trust Republicrats. And those are something totally different than rhinos. And we can talk about that a little bit if you'd like.
Well, let's follow up on that, because as you mentioned this, Steve, and obviously as a radio talk show host, you come in contact so often, as I did, both behind a microphone and while running for public office, the frustration of so many conservatives who say Washington doesn't listen to us. There's a Washington establishment, and then there are real people, and they fail to listen to us. So is that kind of the MO of the so-called Republicrats?
That's exactly what I'm talking about, JD. I think we have confused rhino. I think we overuse the term. It's almost used too much like Nazi now. It doesn't even mean anything. I mean, a rhino, an Arlen Specter, the late Arlen Specter, is sort of a poster child for this. This is somebody who runs left as a Republican, governs left as a Republican. We all know who that is. But the real danger is the wolf in sheep's clothing, the Republicrat, the person that figured out what people want to hear in the post-Reagan age of conservatism and has consultants that teach and coach them on how to condescend to us and how to patronize us and what terminology we want to hear. And they get elected on that because they fire us up. And then once they get into office, nothing really changes. They get infested with what I call RCV, ruling class virus.
Well, let's name names,
yeah.
Steve. If you're
Steve,
going to
give
us the top 3 Republicrats, and are any of them aspiring presidential candidates?
Well, how do I load thee? Let me count the ways. I would say pretty much every current member of leadership for the Republicans in the House and the Senate would absolutely be Republicrats. These are people, for example, you just saw who I like to refer to as Ditch McConnell on my show. You just saw Ditch McConnell roll into CPAC waving a firearm. Now, you'd never see a real rhino like an Arlen Specter show up at CPAC at all, let alone waving a gun. But this is something, again, the consultants get together and they say to Ditch, who's got a very credible primary challenger named Matt Bevin down there in Kentucky, and they say, hey, this is how you patronize these people. This is how you condescend these people. And then if you just show up waving a gun, they'll suddenly forget about everything you've done to put the gun of government to their head, so to speak. So that is just one primary name example of what I'm talking about.
All right, so Mitch McConnell, not a big fan there. On the other hand, who's the counterbalance to a guy like Mitch McConnell?
Well, I think you look at one thing that happened in the Senate last month that I actually think didn't get enough attention. And what happened is McConnell colluded with Reid that they were going to lower the threshold for voting for a debt ceiling increase to a simple majority from 60 to 50. And that way, all the Republicans, many of them facing primary challengers, were going to be able to go back to their base this spring and summer and say, hey, we stood up to Obama. We voted against the debt ceiling increase so the Democrats could pass it with a simple majority. And then a guy like Ted Cruz gets up there in the back Senate cloakroom there in the Senate, in the Republican caucus, and says, I'm not going to let you get away with that. I'm going to filibuster that deal so that all of you have to go on the record voting yes or no on cloture, because your constituents deserve to know where you really stand on these kinds of issues. And of course, that caused quite an uproar from a bunch of gutless Republican politicians. But I would say a gentleman like Cruz is sort of the antidote to what we're talking about.
Well, Steve, you have given us quite a lively discussion. If the book is half as lively as this interview, it's a book every conservative is going to want to read. It's Rules for Patriots. And talk show host and author Steve Deace, we thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
All right, more ahead here on America's Forum. Don't go away. We want to talk to you as well. You can reach out to us on social media as always. You can find us on Twitter at NewsmaxTV, hashtag America's Forum, or on email, connect@newsmaxtv.com, or on Facebook, facebook.com/NewsmaxTV.